The carving knife didn't just slice into the turkey, it cut me completely out of the family history. It was exactly 4:15 p.m. on Thanksgiving Day when my father stood up, tapped his crystal wine glass with a silver fork, and looked directly past me to my cousin, Bradley. "Before we eat," my father announced to the 18 people crammed into our formal dining room, "I want to make it official. Bradley has agreed to buy our family business, Vance Manufacturing, and the historic estate we are sitting in right now. As for my youngest son," he finally locked eyes with me, his expression flat and completely devoid of warmth. "Sean has proven he lacks the vision, the capital, and the basic competence to carry our legacy forward. Effective at midnight tonight, Sean is no longer an employee of this company, no longer an heir to this estate, and no longer welcome under this roof." My mother didn't even look up from her plate. She just reached over, picked up my name card from the table, crumbled it in her fist, and dropped it into her water glass. They thought that midnight deadline was a trapdoor meant to swallow me whole, but they had absolutely no idea that midnight was the exact moment their own legal safety net expired. They genuinely believed I was just a low-level floor supervisor who only survived on their charity, completely blind to the reality that for 18 months, a mysterious blind trust had been quietly buying up the third-party supply chain agreements that kept their entire factory breathing. Exactly 36 months from that horrific dinner, my parents would be huddled in room 114 of a rundown highway motel, watching the battery bars die on my father's phone as he left his 47th consecutive unreturned voicemail, begging me to undo a corporate seizure they never saw coming. The air in the dining room turned to ice. My cousin Bradley didn't just smile. He took a slow, deliberate sip of his vintage Cabernet, leaning back in the heavy oak chair that had belonged to my grandfather. For 3 years, Bradley had been the family golden child, a flashy venture capitalist who showed up to family events in tailored Italian suits and spent hours lecturing my parents on how my traditional management style was holding the family business back. "Don't take it personally, Sean," Bradley said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Business is for sharks, not for line workers. Your dad and mom deserve an early retirement filled with luxury, not a slow bankruptcy caused by your lack of ambition." "I spent 6 days a week on that factory floor for 10 years, Dad," I said, keeping my voice dead level, refusing to give them the tears they were so clearly waiting for. "I modernized our entire inventory tracking system. I saved us from the supply disruptions last winter." My mother finally spoke, her voice sharp and clinical. "And yet, Bradley brought us a cash offer that solves all our liquidity problems, Sean. You brought us spreadsheets and complaints. We need real wealth in this family, not defensive excuses. Your father and I have sacrificed enough for your mediocrity. Your key card to the facility has already been deactivated. Your final paycheck will be mailed to your apartment." Then came the final, orchestrated blow. Bradley's father, my Uncle Richard, stood up and opened the dining room door. Waiting in the hallway were 2 private security guards in high-visibility vests. They weren't there for protection. They were there to escort me out of my childhood home in front of my aunts, uncles, and childhood neighbors who had been invited to the dinner. "Please don't make a scene, Sean," my mother whispered, adjusting her diamond necklace. "It ruins the atmosphere." As the guards grabbed my arms, Bradley raised his glass to me. The entire room went back to talking, the clinking of silver against china resuming before the front door even clicked shut behind me. I stood on the snow-dusted driveway without a coat, listening to the muffled sounds of my family celebrating my total erasure. They wanted me to crawl. They expected me to send frantic text messages begging for forgiveness, or to show up at the office on Monday morning pleading for a lower-level job. What they completely failed to realize was that by stripping me of my title, my access, and my family obligations, they had unlocked the only restraint that was keeping me from using my private assets to utterly dismantle them. For the next 12 months, the narrative inside the family circle was absolute and unforgiving. According to the updates my childhood friend sent me, my parents told everyone at the local country club that I had been fired for financial mismanagement. Bradley was hailed as the corporate savior of Vance Manufacturing. He threw a massive New Year's Eve gala at the estate, using my parents' money to fly in investors from Chicago, publicly branding the company as a new age tech logistics disruptor. Whenever anyone asked about me, my father would shake his head, take a deep breath, and say, "Sean simply didn't have the stomach for high-level operations. Last I heard, he's working an hourly shift at a regional shipping hub. Some people are just meant to take orders, not give them." But while they were busy painting me as a broken casualty of their success, the reality was unfolding in an entirely different zip code. That regional shipping hub they thought I was working for wasn't an hourly gig. It was Vanguard Logistics Group, a private equity firm specializing in industrial supply chains. I wasn't an hourly worker. I was the principal founder. I had spent 5 years quietly building Vanguard using my own capital, entirely separate from the family business, keeping my name off the public filings by utilizing a highly complex blind trust structure based out of Delaware. My family thought Vance Manufacturing was an independent empire. What they didn't understand about manufacturing was that a factory is just an expensive box of metal if it can't source raw materials or ship finished goods. For 10 years, I had watched my father sign exclusive, long-term vendor contracts with 3 major regional suppliers for steel, specialized plastics, and freight logistics. And in the second year of my exile, those 3 independent suppliers all hit major cash flow crises due to shifting market conditions. They needed a buyer. I didn't just buy them. I absorbed them entirely into Vanguard Logistics. By the 24th month after that Thanksgiving dinner, my family's entire operation was completely surrounded. Every pound of steel they melted, every plastic housing they stamped, and every single truck that rolled out of their shipping bay was entirely controlled by a corporate entity they didn't recognize, operating under an ironclad clock that was rapidly ticking down to their next contract renewal cycle. The first major crack in Bradley's golden facade appeared when he attempted to expand the factory floor by taking out a massive $4.2 million commercial loan against the historic family estate. He needed the capital to fulfill a massive new contract with a national retail distributor, a contract he had aggressively bid on by cutting their profit margins down to a razor-thin 3%. To secure the loan, Bradley had convinced my parents to sign over the deed of the estate as primary collateral, assuring them that the new retail contract would triple their quarterly dividends within 6 months. I knew about the loan agreement within 20 minutes of it being uploaded to the commercial registry because the underwriting bank was a secondary lender that relied heavily on Vanguard Logistics for credit verification. I didn't block the loan. I actively signaled to the bank that Vance Manufacturing looked stable on paper. I wanted Bradley to get every single dollar he asked for. I wanted the stakes to be so high that failure wouldn't just mean a bad quarter. It would mean total liquidation. 3 months later, I triggered the trap. As the owner of their primary supply chain, I issued a formal, non-negotiable 32% price increase on all raw steel and plastic components, citing global shipping reevaluations. Because Bradley had locked the company into that fixed 3% margin contract with the national retailer, he couldn't pass the cost onto the buyer. Overnight, Vance Manufacturing wasn't just losing money. They were bleeding $85,000 every single week just to keep the machines running. That's when the frantic paperwork started flying behind the scenes. My private investigator, whom I had retained to monitor the corporate health of their facility, sent me a digital folder containing internal financial emails between Bradley and my father. One PDF was a spreadsheet marked * confidential urgent restructure. Bradley had highlighted their monthly operational expenses in bright red. In the comments section, my father had written, "Bradley, we are defaulting on the estate loan if we don't fix this by November. Where is the surplus you promised? Can we sue the suppliers for price gouging?" The answer came in a certified corporate response letter drafted by my legal team. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a cold citation of the original contracts my father had signed years ago, contracts that explicitly allowed for market rate adjustments with 30 days' notice. At the bottom of that document, instead of a faceless corporate logo, I had my attorney intentionally include the primary parent company registration code, Vanguard Vance Holdings LLC *. My father didn't catch the name variance at first. He was too busy scrambling to find a secondary source of materials. But every alternative supplier he called across the Midwest gave him the exact same response. "We can't fulfill your order. Our logistics are handled exclusively by Vanguard, and their capacity is fully booked." The walls were closing in, and the calendar was rolling steadily toward another Thanksgiving. The final collapse didn't take place in the quiet privacy of a boardroom. It happened exactly 3 years to the day after my public humiliation at the annual Chamber of Commerce Gala, the premier social event for the town's elite business owners, local politicians, and media. My parents had spent 20 years occupying the center table at this gala, using it to project their image of generational stability. This year, however, the atmosphere was entirely different. Rumors of Vance Manufacturing's massive supply chain failures and missed payrolls had already leaked to the local banking community. My parents arrived early, walking into the grand ballroom with stiff, forced smiles. My mother was wearing the same diamond necklace from 3 years ago, but her eyes were darting nervously around the room. Bradley was by her side, sweating through his designer suit, frantically whispering into his phone. They took their seats at table 4, expecting to be joined by their usual circle of wealthy country club friends. Instead, those friends suddenly found reasons to visit the bar, or completely avoided looking toward table 4 entirely. The social contagion of financial death was already on them. At precisely 7:30 p.m., the ballroom doors opened wide. The gala coordinator, a woman who had previously ignored my emails for years, walked backward into the room, guiding a small entourage toward the absolute center of the venue, Table 1, which had been reserved for the night's keynote donor. I walked in. I wasn't the unkempt line worker they remembered. I was wearing a bespoke midnight blue tux, flanked by 2 senior corporate attorneys and the regional director of the state's largest commercial bank. The room fell into an immediate, heavy hush. My mother's wine glass rattled against her saucer, the exact same sound from 3 years prior, but this time it was driven by sheer, unadulterated shock. My father stood up so fast he knocked his chair back several inches, his face turning a deep, dangerous shade of crimson. "Sean," my father barked, his voice carrying over the soft jazz music playing through the speakers. "What the hell is the meaning of this? Who let you into this event?" I didn't answer him directly. I walked straight to table 1, sat down, and unbuttoned my jacket. My attorney, Mr. Harrison, walked over to my father's table, pulling a certified envelope from his breast pocket. He laid it flat on the white tablecloth, right next to my father's bread plate. "Mr. Vance," Harrison said loudly enough for the surrounding tables to hear every syllable, "I am representing Vanguard Logistics Group. As of 4:00 p.m. today, our firm has officially completed the acquisition of your primary commercial mortgage and the personal line of credit attached to your estate. Both accounts are currently 90 days delinquent. We have declined the restructuring proposal submitted by your nephew, Bradley." Bradley jumped up, his face slick with sweat. "You can't do that. We have an open grace period until the end of the month. Who the hell is Vanguard anyway? I want to speak to your principal. I stood up from table 1, walked across the short gap between our tables, and looked down at the contract on the cloth. The principal is standing right here, Bradley, I said, my voice completely calm, cutting through the murmurs of the crowd. And your grace period expired at midnight last night. My mother looked like she was about to faint. She looked at me, then at the attorneys, then at the prominent bank director who was currently nodding respectfully in my direction. Sean, she stammered, her hand reaching out automatically as if to grab my sleeve. You own the banknotes? No, that's impossible. You work at a shipping dock. Your father said you were ruined. I let you believe what you wanted to believe, Mom, I replied, looking around the room at the faces of the neighbors who had watched me get escorted out by security 3 years ago. Because as long as you thought I was powerless, you didn't look closely at who was buying up your liabilities. Bradley didn't save your company. He just gave me the map on how to buy it piece by piece without ever having to step foot on your floor. My father's chest was heaving. He looked at the paperwork, his signature staring back at him from the collateral agreements. You're throwing your own flesh and blood out of the business I built, after everything we gave you. You didn't give me anything, Dad. You fired me at a holiday dinner to impress a man who used your life savings to play venture capitalist, I said, turning my gaze to Bradley, who was now staring at his phone as if hoping for a miracle text that wasn't coming. Vance Manufacturing is no longer yours. The factory locks are being changed right now. And as for the estate, you have exactly 48 hours to clear out your personal items before the asset liquidation team arrives. The local newspaper photographer, who had been positioning himself near the stage, suddenly turned his lens toward our table, the bright flash capturing my father's expression of total devastation. But the public exposure was only the first phase of the cost they were about to pay. The fallout was instantaneous and merciless. Bradley's investors completely vanished before the gala even ended, realizing his access to family capital was completely dead. By Monday morning, Vance Manufacturing was placed into corporate receivership under my firm's control. I didn't close the factory. I stepped onto the floor at 7:00 a.m., met with the line supervisors I used to work alongside, and announced a 15% wage increase across the board, solidifying their complete loyalty to the new regime. My parents, completely broke and unable to maintain the lifestyle or the country club fees, were forced to vacate the historic estate. Because every single asset had been cross-collateralized by Bradley's disastrous expansion loans, their personal bank accounts were completely frozen by the primary creditors to satisfy the outstanding balance. On Friday evening, exactly 3 weeks after the gala, I was working late in my new executive suite overlooking the city when my personal assistant line buzzed. It was a direct bypass from an unlisted number. I picked up the receiver and pressed the speaker button. "Sean, is that you?" My father's voice didn't sound like the proud patriarch who had commanded the Thanksgiving table. It was thin, shaking, and punctuated by the loud, rhythmic roar of semi-trucks passing by in the background. "I'm here, Dad," I said. "Sean, we are at the Blue Stars Motel off Interstate 80, he choked out, completely breaking down into a dry, raspy sob. "The bank took the luxury sedan yesterday. We had to use the last of our cash just to pay for a week in this place. Your mother's blood pressure medication is running out and Richard won't answer our calls. Bradley checked himself into a private facility in another state and won't speak to us. We have nothing left, Sean. Please, we are. Your parents. You can't leave us to die in a place like this." I sat back in my leather chair, looking at the framed photo on my desk, the one of my grandfather standing in front of the original factory gates, a photo my father had thrown into the hallway closet the day he fired me. "Dad," I said smoothly. Do you remember what Mom said when she pulled my name card off the table? A heavy, terrified silence came over the line, broken only by the sound of my mother weeping somewhere in the background of that cheap motel room. She said it ruined the atmosphere, I continued, my tone entirely devoid of anger, replaced by a cold, mathematical certainty. You told 18 people that I lacked the vision and the competence to be part of your legacy. You didn't care if I had a place to sleep that night. You had your cash offer. You had your golden child. We were wrong, Sean. We were misled by Bradley. We didn't know. No, you didn't know because you never bothered to look at my actual worth, I said. You only valued people based on how much they could flatter your ego. I'm not going to let you freeze on the street. My assistant will arrange for a monthly allowance that covers Mom's medication and a basic, one-bedroom senior apartment in the lowest-cost county in the state. But you will never step foot inside Vance Manufacturing again. You will never see the inside of my home, and you will never hold a position of status in this town for the rest of your lives. Sean, please. The motel is disgusting. There are drug dealers outside our door right now. My father begged, his pride completely shattered. Then I suggest you lock your door, I replied. Your final arrangement paperwork will be mailed to you. Don't call this number again. I cut the connection and deleted the call log. The historic family estate was stripped of my parents' personal branding and converted into a corporate retreat and historical archive for the factory's long-term workforce. I didn't sell it to developers. I preserved it as a reminder of what actual labor builds, ensuring that no single family ego could ever weaponize it again. Uncle Richard and his family filed for personal bankruptcy 6 months later after several vendors sued them for secondary liabilities related to Bradley's fraudulent investment claims. My cousin Bradley is currently working a low-level data entry job for a logistics firm out west. His name, permanently flagged in the commercial banking registry as a high-risk credit liability. He lives in a shared apartment with 3 roommates, entirely isolated from the corporate world he tried to conquer. They thought they could erase me from the family tree because they only looked at the branches, completely forgetting that I was the one down in the dirt, keeping the roots alive.